مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. لابد أن جو بايدن قد شاهد حفل تتويج الملك تشارلز الثالث بشيء من الحسد، فما حصل في بريطانيا هو أن رجل مسن انتظر لعقود من الزمن للحصول على المنصب الأعلى، وما قد حقق هدفه أخيرا فقط بسبب طول عمره. بينما هنا في أمريكا عاش جو بايدن طويلا بما فيه الكفاية ليحقق العديد من الانتصارات السياسية، ومع ذلك تقول لنا أرقام استطلاعات الرأي أن بايدن يواجه تحديا صعبا في الحفاظ على منصبه في انتخابات العام المقبل. ما السبب أن ثلث الأمريكيين فقط راض عن بايدن كرئيس؟ هل من مشكلة في بايدن؟ أم أن توقعات الأمريكيين بقضاتهم مرتفعة جدا؟ هل أخطأ بايدن عندما قال إنه علينا ألا نقارنه بالكمال المطلق، بل يجب مقارنته بمن هو بديل عنه؟ قبل بضعة أسابيع فقط أعلن بايدن عن ترشحه لولاية ثانية. بالتالي قد لا تكون استطلاعات الرأي هذه ذات أهمية، ولكنها حتما لا تحمل إخبارا جيدا لمناقشة ما تعنيه هذه الاستطلاعات وكيف ستؤثر في السياسة خلال الأشهر الأولى من الحملة الرئاسية. يسعدني أن أرحب بفريق من الخبراء السياسيين ستيف كليمنز ودانيال ليبمان وجون أولدريتش. Welcome back to داخل Washington. President Biden announced his re-election bid, and instead of his polls going up with the excitement of a new campaign, they slumped. Why? And does it mean anything as we begin the long march to November 2024? I'm delighted to welcome Steve Clemens, John Aldrich, and Daniel Lippman with me today. So let's begin with you, Steve. 36% approval rating for a sitting president, one who just announced his re-election bid. Why are the numbers moving in the wrong direction for President Biden?
Well, some Democratic pollsters are out there arguing there's just one poll, it's not that bad, there are too many conservatives in it. If I were the White House, if I were around Joe Biden, I would be freaking out. But I think the big issue, when you talk to his team and you talk to them honestly behind the scenes and off the record, as I'm sure my colleagues occasionally do, there's a lot of doubt about Joe Biden, and in particular about his age and his not his career, not about what he's accomplished, but about as you look at the future and what he's able to do, there's substantial doubt that he has the capacity to do it. And I think that's why his numbers are down.
So just to provide a bit of context, John, Professor Aldrich, John, what's the historic norm for successful re-election campaigns? I mean, as sitting presidents announce their re-election, generally, where are they in the national poll numbers?
So generally, they're at a higher level, but things have changed, and we're seeing the manifestation of the change. If you remember, Donald Trump's approval ratings were quite low always. Biden's have been throughout his term. It started really mostly being revealed during Obama's presidency. It's very hard to get a high in approval ratings anymore because the other party won't ever give you any edge at all. So you're kind of limited at 55 or less percent at the very best. And that's after some exciting event like winning a war or something, as George H.W. Bush had. So they have become entirely compressed, and there's very little room for the president to make as much difference in his or her approval ratings as they used to do. That's the big historical context.
So, but Daniel, the mid-30s can't excite Democrats very much. Yes, 55 would be nirvana, but the mid-30s, that's not going to win you much in any game, right?
Not that much. That indicates basically it's only the hardcore Democratic base who loves Biden, and some of those moderate independent voters who live in the suburbs, those average Americans, they are not as excited. They are asking Democrats, don't you have any fresh faces? Is Biden the best chance to defeat Donald Trump, who's likely the Republican nominee? And what does Biden even want to do in the second term? He hasn't really made it clear except for defeating Donald Trump. And is he going to bring back child care tax credits, which didn't get passed a couple of years ago? Or what is on his agenda, and is his age an impediment to getting that stuff done? So
let me just continue with you for a minute, Daniel. 58% of Democrats say they'd rather have another nominee. Those are the people that voted for Biden in 2020. Has he been really such a disappointment for even those Democrats?
Well, I don't think it's about him being a disappointment. Democrats are very happy with what Biden has done. He got the infrastructure package passed, which is rebuilding roads and bridges across the country. He got a couple $100 billion in climate change spending. He got a CHIPS Act passed and lots of other things. But I think it's more about Democrats' worries about what the second term could bring. They don't know if Biden has the stamina to face a second presidential campaign this century, and so I think they are worried that how would he do in the debates? Would Trump run all over him and appear strong, even though they're similar of ages? But Trump seems to be much more excitable and much stronger on a debate stage in terms of his endurance.
Steve, does the 58% saying they'd like another nominee, is that a serious number, or is that just a expression that you can do 18 months out, but has no real?
No, I honestly think it's a very serious number, and I think they are facing a real problem and a speed bump in their aspirations to secure another 4 years in the White House. And something we're not talking about here is, while we're talking about Biden's age, we're really talking about people who are not just worried about his competency, but about something happening to him and who would be next in line. And that happens to be a very unpopular vice president, unpopular among Democrats, Kamala Harris. And so this is one of the elections. You rarely think about the number two folks when you're looking at who's going to lead a ticket. But in this case, I think the unpopular vice president essentially, gives echo effect to the concerns about Biden's age and what that may mean in terms of leadership for the country. And I think a lot of Democrats were disappointed that he didn't change up the game and bring in someone who might be more popular and perceived to be more effective.
John, when you look at this dynamic, do you think it's indeed even possible that Joe Biden may shake things up in the way Steve suggested? Would that be an advantage to him, or would it suggest, to voters that he's made bad decisions in the past, and maybe this shift is a bad decision too?
So he's. I don't think it's so much the bad decisions in the past. It is. I agree that it is concerning that there's not somebody there standing in the wings that people would be pleased to have move up, not necessarily excited about. Because I think the biggest question about the 58% of Democrats who might prefer someone else is not that they're going to vote for Biden in the fall of 2024, but are they going to be enthusiastic enough to actually get to the polls? And that's going to make a big difference because things are so close anyway. And every one of those Democrats you don't turn out as a lost vote. Whereas, so that's really critical. So something that would provide a looking forward for the next 4 years in a positive way would be useful. One of the things could be a different vice president. After all, Franklin Roosevelt kept picking different vice presidents. Of course, he had lots of opportunities to do so, but he did keep picking different ones for different purposes.
But I mean, we have to remind ourselves in the Democratic Party, African American voters, and especially African American women voters, are the most loyal segment of the overall coalition. A change would, I assume, run the risk of offending that key constituency.
Steve? I mean, the problem there is she's not popular with those constituencies. It would be great if they brought on someone who was popular with those constituencies. I'm not advocating he drop her. I'm just saying when you look at what's driving his unpopularity, there are a lot of factors. And I think the biggest one of them is age, concern about what would come after. And right now they have a substantial problem. Maybe it's marketing, maybe it's substantive, where Kamala Harris, for whatever reason, is not connecting the stories that she brings. You know, Vice President Biden, when he was under Obama, got the crappiest parts of the Obama portfolio to deal with. And some of these lemons he turned into lemonade. She's not had any lemonade come out of this. I know this is something we'll have to explain to our audience, but it means that she has not turned any of the tough jobs that she has been given into successes, at least not in the perception that people have. And that's a real problem for them.
Daniel, when you talk to people, especially Democrats, say on Capitol Hill, these poll numbers that we're discussing in terms of national reactions, how do they reflect professional politicians' views about where the president and his candidacy stand?
No, I think they jive well with what Democrats on the Hill and in the greater Democratic Party think. They are pretty disappointed with Harris and they thought that she could get better political skills in the last couple of years, but she's never been that great of a politician. She's always been, she was a prosecutor, she was an attorney general, she was a senator, and I've written about how she's even had troubles in her own teams where every time she's switched jobs or moved up in the ranks in American politics, she's basically had a whole new team. And so if the people who work for her can't even barely stand her, then how can we expect people in the broader America to like her or respect her? And of course, she's paved a way in terms of being a path-breaking woman for this job, but that doesn't mean you get a free pass. And there's plenty of politicians who are women who are much more agile politically and kind of get the game better.
All right, fascinating. Well, when we come back after the break, we're going to take one of Joe Biden's favorite adages, which is, don't compare me with the almighty, compare me with the alternative, and we're going to inject the story of the man who is at the moment the most likely alternative, and then we'll have a real discussion about where we stand 18 months out or so before our next presidential election after the break. Again, my guests today include Steve Clemens. Steve is the founding editor-at-large for Semaphore, an international news site. Previously, he was at The Hill, The Atlantic, New America Foundation, and the Nixon Center for Peace and Freedom. Also joining us is Daniel Lippman. Daniel covers the Washington political scene for Politico, where he also authors the social data section of Politico's New York Playbook. Previously, he was a reporter with the Wall Street Journal in New York. And joining us from the academic scene is John Aldrich. John is Pfizer Pratt Distinguished Professor of Political Science at Duke University. He has authored a number of books about American politics, and delighted to welcome you all today. All right, let's add the head-to-head race in that poll we were talking about before the break. In a head-to-head race today between Joe Biden and the man he defeated in 2020, who is the at least today, the most likely Republican candidate in 2024, Donald Trump, the numbers are Biden 38, Trump 44. Given everything that has happened, how is that possible? Daniel?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Biden's campaign has just started, and Trump's campaign has been going on for a while. And even since he basically left office, he has been hinting that he's going to run. And so I think there, so far it hasn't really been framed as a choice. We haven't seen Biden hit the campaign trail much. They haven't had many TV ads from Biden about his accomplishments. But it's definitely concerning Democrats who say, these numbers are horrible and they would rather be ahead. But it usually only matters, it only matters about who finishes well. And I think Democrats feel like with all of the criminal charges and the civil lawsuits that Trump is losing, that in a year, Republicans and some independents will defect away from Trump and not want to vote for someone who could be behind bars on election day.
So, Steve, let me ask you about that. Just recently, Donald Trump was found responsible in a New York courtroom, in a federal courtroom, of sexual abuse and defamation. Not quite the rape charge with which he was first accused, but pretty bad. No one wants to be guilty of sexual abuse and defamation. Will this change any votes?
Well, I think it probably will. The numbers that you cite and that Daniel was talking about, I think Daniel's exactly right. Some of these other pending legal dimensions of Trump's future are lying out there lurking. But with this $5 million judgment against him for sexual abuse and defamation, we have to remember that's a very sensitive issue in American politics. And I don't want to commingle too many issues, but you have to remember what saved the Democrats, to some degree, if you can call it that, what prevented them from sinking, were concerns about abortion, that Republicans were essentially disregarding the rights of women, the concerns of women. So this is a basket of issues related to women's role in society and how they're treated and respect. And I think that if you were to go do those polls again right now, Donald Trump may have suffered some loss in that. But I think that I think Daniel frames it right. Biden is just beginning. You have it, but it's fascinating to see these two guys, both of whom have concerns about them, both in their own caucuses, candidly, and there are a lot of concerns about both of them among independents. And I think as we see, Joe Biden's future rollout, we're going to have to see how he deals with the doubts about himself and his abilities. With Donald Trump, we're going to have to see how these court issues work out on how he handled classified material, what his role was perceived to be, and whether it was illegal in January 6th, and how he meddled or didn't meddle, or what people in a grand jury in Georgia think with regards to meddling in the 2020 election. All of these are big issues. And I've talked to a lot of Republicans, as my colleagues do, and all of them say that these other three pending legal quagmires for Trump are far more significant than the judgments against them so far.
So let's try to bring these two stories together, John. The Biden story and the Trump story. First, we know what could negatively affect Joe Biden over the next year or so, and that's some episode that highlights age, fragility, that sort of thing. Is there anything that could shift him positively and really boost his campaign over the next period of time?
The biggest thing for him would be that I think would help a good bit would be if there were some negotiated settlement in the Ukraine. That would relieve things, followed or similarly followed by economic vitality that's not got continued potential for inflation, worry about banking industry and so forth. If we would happen to be by 2024 in a good economic circumstance, those would be two things that would be attackable on substantive grounds from the Republicans, whoever they nominate, including Trump, of course. That would be alleviated and allow him to make a more positive message.
All right, we're going to have to call it hit there. Fascinating discussion. Thank you, Daniel, Steve, and John, for joining us on Dakhel Washington. I will admit to two very mixed feelings as I watched highlights from the coronation of King Charles III. First, having reached an age myself when I receive marketing mail for retirement homes, hearing aids, and burial insurance, it's tough to accuse me of being ageist. So please take this in stride. I thought Charles and Camilla were just a bit too old to be king and queen. The whole affair reminded me of the old Soviet days when Brezhnev gave way to Chernenko, who gave way to Andropov, or perhaps the way one aged Saudi king used to follow another until they ran out and had to jump a generation to what we seem will be the next king, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. In the TV show The Crown, we have an indelible image of what a coronation should celebrate: the elevation of a young monarch to launch a new modern era. Now, I have a lot of respect for Charles. It's tough enough being vice president of the United States for 4 or 8 years. Imagine being vice president, as it were, of the British monarchy for 50 years. And he deserves his time on the throne. But I couldn't help feeling the whole affair was a Benjamin Button movie. Second, through it all, I felt a bit jealous that the Brits have someone who is above politics, a unifying force that can appeal to the better angels of the inner character of the British people without his or her motives coming under constant attack by the culture warriors or the political guerrilla fighters. Now, I am a proud son of the state of Rhode Island, one of America's 13 original colonies, and the birthplace of religious freedom and tolerance in the Western world. I am no monarchist. But that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate the benefits of having a head of state separate from the head of government. In America, our president fills both functions, which are really two difficult jobs, each challenging in its own way. At moments of national calamity, tragedy, or achievement, presidents can inspire, can condole, they can mourn. It's one of their most important tasks, one whose symbolic power is being diminished by the political acrimony that is first cousin to our deep political partisanship. Now, many countries, from Germany to Israel, separate these jobs, and it often makes a lot of sense. Of course, Charles is in a unique category. As the legacy heir of a vast global empire, he's not only head of state of the United Kingdom, but he's head of state of 13 other countries: Antigua and Barbuda, Australia, the Bahamas, Belize, Canada, Grenada, Jamaica, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Solomon Islands, and Tuvalu. In some places, he is a divisive figure, as we see in anti-monarchist protests by Quebecois activists in Canada. But in many places, he is a unifying figure. And more generally, heads of state play an enormously useful role, especially at time of deep political division. So, like many other viewers, I suppose, I watched the coronation with a mix of envy, delight, fascination, and a wee bit of ridicule. The monarchy is, I believe, an institution very much worth keeping. I'm just thankful it's not ours. بهذا نصل إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إن كان لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة، وخاصة فيما يتعلق بالأشهر الأولى من الانتخابات الرئاسية لعام 2024، أرجو أن تتواصلوا معي عبر تويتر على هاشتاغ Inside Washington أو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على @RobSatloff. إلى اللقاء في الأسبوع القادم، حتى ذلك حين شكرا وإلى اللقاء.